We're going to get started. Welcome, welcome. My name is Lauren Vargas, and I'm going to be your moderator, your glorified timekeeper today. We welcome you to the ITU Founding Lab and presentation of the Founding Lab publication, a documentation of the joint ITU and Ars Electronica summer school and fall term program of 2023-2024. ITU, which is the Interdisciplinary Transformation University, Austria, is one of the first public universities in Europe exclusively dedicated to the digital transformation of science, business, and society. Based in Linz, it offers a new way of learning in a digital world. A project-based and inclusive approach to technical education equips students from a wide range of disciplines with the digital skills required to tackle global challenges. Now, it seems we can't go a step or have a conversation today without mentioning AI. As futurist Amy Webb states, we are in the midst of a technology supercycle, the convergence of general purpose technologies, artificial intelligence, biotechnology, and the interconnected devices. So as we think about where we've come from and what we're going to be talking today, we're going to be building on the collaboration between ITU and Ars Electronica, which began last year in 2023 with the Founding Lab to rethink the future of universities. Today, we're going to be highlighting the current practices and stimulating international conversations that shape the future of AI in education. Experts from universities and diverse disciplines will provide valuable insights and into their current approaches and share their strategies on transdisciplinary and practice-based learning. It is a very packed schedule today. It is hot. So if you need to move around, get some air flowing, please do. We're gonna have a short break before the panel discussion, and you can find all of the speaker bios on the website. I will be tailoring them tremendously so that we can get through today's program. I'd like to welcome on the stage first the elected founding president of ITU, Stefanie Lindstaedt.
Does it work? No? Hello?
Yes.
Now. Okay, great. Well, we were here last year with our very first summer school students, many of whom are here, and some of them are exhibiting their projects out there right in front. And so we invited you to come to this forum because we want to exchange with as many universities as possible about how we can do more praxis-based learning and open research, because this is exactly what we want to do, or what we are doing at ITU. ITU is a newly, last year, funded public university on digitalization. Our long name is Interdisciplinary Transformation University. We're here in Linz, and our goal is to bring digitalization into the different disciplines. So therefore, interdisciplinarity is an important, very important part of our DNA. And secondly, project-based learning, we elected as our choice for the teaching method. And so we've been flying around in the world, talking to Helsinki and Aalto and Aalborg and ETH and whatever, in order to figure out how do other universities do project-based learning. What are the best practices? What should we avoid? Because maybe we should not do all the same mistakes as everybody has done. And to really see how we can bring this into a very new university. And and start from there. So what has happened since last year? So last year we had a summer school of 75 international students together with Ars Electronica. And since then we have been able to hire 11 professors. They will start in October in all matters of computational X. So it's always computer science plus a different other disciplines. We have started or announced our first 2 PhD programs. We are currently looking for PhD students, so whoever is interested, I have a whole flyers here for the application call. We have now 40 students for this summer school. Most of them are still at ITU and trying to finish their projects for this year. We want also to show with ITU that interdisciplinarity is more than the sum of its parts, and that it's not dividing problems up into pieces which can be solved separately by a discipline, but by really bringing it together. And so this is our mission. And the question is, how can we really do this properly? Because I mean, so many people say they're doing interdisciplinary research, but in the end, if you look at it, many times it's rather 2 disciplines separate, like somehow glued together. So we invited you here from all over the world to share with us your experiences on project or praxis-based learning. You're all experts, you're leaders, and we meet here on a peer level and just want to enjoy open discussions and get your ideas and exchange ideas how we do this in the future. I also want to specifically welcome our students from the class of 2023, our first gen students, and the second gen students from this year. And in doing so, I also want to really extend a big thank you to my team, to the team of ITU, which has really set up the exhibitions and worked with the students in the projects. And I also want to thank again Ars Electronica and your team for all the help which we got from you. So now I have to put on my glasses, sorry. So the question is, why do we really need interdisciplinarity? And our point is really that we want to look into societal challenges. We want to see we don't want to work on fake problems. We want to work on real problems. There are more than enough real problems out in the world. We don't need to make them up. And so therefore we are in close collaboration with industry, with NGOs, with the city of Linz, for example, in order to collect these kind of challenges and use them as the starting point and as the discussion point for our projects. This is something which we will really be starting in October with our first PhD students, where we are starting our PhD program on digital transformation in learning, in higher ed learning. So, of course, here the circle comes back. And well, I'm looking really forward to all the discussions with you, and I hope you also enjoy our keynote speaker and our short lighthouse speakers, which we have brought to you. Thank you very much, and see you around.
If you want, you can go ahead and sit. And just some brief words, I'd like to welcome up to the stage Gerfried Stoker, the Artistic Director of Ars Electronica.
To use the opportunity to say thanks, Stefanie, to you and your team. Thanks in particular to the fellows who were working with the students, and of course to the students and artists from last year bringing their projects. We will have also the presentation of this wonderful publication, summing up and presenting a super interesting experiment that we could conduct together. Can you start a university with a festival? At least I think we got a lot of very interesting learnings and many directions where we have to lead our discussions, and I'm very happy that this collaboration is going on, so please enjoy this afternoon. Thank you very much, Stefanie.
Thank you. All right, we're going to have the chance now to hear from some of our students and talk a bit more about where this project, where this initiative is going. I had the opportunity last year to be part of a session talking about what is the future of this particular university? How might we rethink and reimagine what could be? So I'd like to invite back to the stage Stefanie Lindstaedt, and Pinyao Liu, who is an interdisciplinary artist and researcher based in Linz and Vancouver, Canada, and Amanda Bennetts, who is an Australian installation artist who critically explores how algorithms can improve an individual's well-being and advocate for patient-driven technological development. Do you want to share? All right, Stefanie, you gave us a wonderful intro into ITU. Perhaps you could tell us a bit more about, what has the experience been since last year, since all of the excitement and the energy of the founding lab? What did you learn? What did you bring into that into this year?
Well, I had the honor to meet all these wonderful students, and I had the honor to also visit, see their transformation. Because what I found really interesting when we met here 1 year ago, we had these smaller group discussions, workshops with the students, and we always asked, okay, what should ITU really teach? What kind of things should we bring across? And one of the answers, not directly to this question, but was always that students felt very insecure about their future, because that was just at the time where ChatGPT had been released, where everybody was trying it out and everybody was flabbergasted about what it can do. And a lot of the students said, well, if ChatGPT and AI can do all of this, what is my role in the world? And I was really touched, and I was really worried, because if these young people who are well-educated and full of creativity and smart feel this, then what does that mean for everybody else even, right? Mm-hmm. So the question was, what can we do about it? And now when I look at them, they've all experimented a lot with AI, and now it's more like, okay, what can AI do for me? And how can we use it as a tool in order to get things done which I want to get done, because I want to actually give something back to society, and what could be the role of AI in that context. So I think, if I may say so, in a way, we kind of encouraged you to really look at these new futures in a more positive way, and to really take the bull by its horn and really create solutions which on the one hand might help to solve the problems, and on the other hand also helps us to get into a deeper dialogue about the challenges of AI.
It sounds like you've really created an environment where you're moving from a user to a shaper, and you're giving these students the ability to experiment and to explore what could be. That's excellent. Thank you. I'd like to hear a little bit more about the experience of founding labs. So perhaps, Amanda, you could give us a bit of your take and what your thoughts have been, what you've learned, what your insights are.
So I think it's been a year since that we started the founding lab as students, and it's been incredible. Pinyao and I have both been living in Linz for 6 months over the winter for the fall term, and coming together with all these students who are like-minded but from so many disciplines, just share their interests and the concerns, really inspired me for collaborating further. It wasn't something I did in my artistic practice, and I went back home to Australia after the fall term, so in February, and I found that I was only looking for collaborations, that I wanted to continue this discourse of discussing and exchanging ideas. And for this spring term, I've collaborated with a data scientist, and we're looking at the biodata that will drive the healthcare revolution, AI revolution, and how can we get more people to be engaged with their biodata, and what can AI do if we just separate our data to a small data set. So we've really like delved in, we refined our methodology to be more scientific, but then at the same time, I was still able to create a very speculative wellness spa. It's been great.
And your experience?
Yeah, I totally agree. And for me, something really unique about Founding Lab is actually, I think, the playfulness that it offered and the openness that it offered. So while at Founding Lab, I had the freedom to pursue a pretty wild project because I was working on dreams. And more specifically, I was very interested how we might be able to re-experience our dream or relive our dream. And that's a very challenging project because you cannot just talk within one discipline. So I was collaborating with neuroscientists from Montreal. They have a specific lab called Dream and Nightmare Lab. And they're doing really cool research about the science of dreams. So what we try to do is we try to use 3D generative AI to create a virtual dream world so that people can relive their dream experience inside that virtual world. And to do that, we were collaborating with these dream scientists. We were also collaborating with data scientists and, of course, cognitive scientists as well. So it's a blend of different collaborators. And I think the very first mentality of the Founding Lab is to dare to risk, because Stefanie was talking about the insecurity of breaking out the boundary between different disciplines. And I think that's what Founding Lab offer, is to help us to dare to risk and step that first step in a way.
Well, I'd like to expand on that a little bit more because collaboration is easier said than done. I think we can all agree. So as you were working together, as you were immersed in this community, in this environment, what did collaboration mean to you maybe at the beginning of your experience, and what does it mean now?
Do you want me to go? So when I arrived last year, I really wanted to work with a data scientist. So I was like this outgoing Australian going to every data science student here, let's collaborate. And they were a bit, put off by me. Fair enough. But I was really interested in healthcare. I'd just been diagnosed with a rare muscle disease. I had put some information into ChatGPT. The disease is so rare that I don't know how, but it put it at number 3. I was later diagnosed. So I was just drove like, this is the rabbit hole into my exploration with AI. But I learned that I can't just turn up somewhere and collaborate with someone. I need to break down barriers, and I need to learn the language that they use, respect them, and find common interests between myself and collaborators to be able to think of ideas moving forward. So it wasn't easy, but it was rewarding.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for me, collaboration is so fundamental to our research because, I come from a background of human-computer interaction, so it's more computer science. And in that field, very few people talk about dreams. And then on the contrary, in dream science community, very few people talk about technology. Very few people talk about VR and AI. So it really takes this interdisciplinary collaboration so that we can start to talk to each other and then start to bring something new and exciting to the table. And then for me, it gets super interesting when we start to combine the expertise of the dream research and then the expertise from virtual reality research and then bring them together. That's where I feel personally super excited about. And I think that's it's because of the interdisciplinary collaboration to make that happen.
Excellent. Stefanie, we have a wonderful exhibition space out there, and I'm sure not everybody has yet gone to see it. What would you like people to think about or carry with them as they explore that space?
Well, first of all, you really have to go and see it. These are 5 really amazing projects which absolutely show interdisciplinary research, interdisciplinary work, and I'm just absolutely flabbergasted and amazed. So I think what you need to understand is that there were people in engaging in a topic which was very dear to their heart. And they were able to, on the one side, learn a lot of the technology from ITU, from our fellows and from people working at ITU. But at the same time, they brought so much from their own backgrounds into it, which makes it a whole, really a whole. And so, for example, the projects of Amanda with this, they created an own smartwatch, in order to collect all this data. And so they designed the sensors, they designed the watch, they designed the casing, and they printed it in 3D. And so there's so many different steps and aspects which I find amazing that you were bringing this all together. So I think the diversity and the wholeness of the thing, I think this is really important, because often when we are in a university, we are only looking at pieces. Mm-hmm. And I think if we really want to be building passion, we need to make people really work on the whole.
Right, we need to see how those connections are interwoven, how they come together, et cetera. Yes. Amanda, would you please expand maybe a bit about what we can expect in the exhibition space from you, and maybe what you would like people to think about or question when they go to your space?
We've had a lot of engagement, Joanna and I, with our space this morning. It's called Do Algorithms Care? And we've set it up like a tech store. Joanna and I are tech bros at the Genius Bar. But really, we're not selling anything. We're giving you the option for an open-sourced and controlling your own data, and to consider the data, biodata, health data, where does the data come from in health, the embodied, it's embodied knowledge of people who were previously ill, and how can we get others to think more about this and the ethics around that. So you can create your own smartwatch, you can access it, you get the code, you can print it, but we're not selling it. Yet we've had so many people ask. But it is designed to, we're using the same tactics as tech companies to draw you in. So that's what you can expect from our...
Very exciting. Pinyao, tell us a little bit more about yours.
Yes, so my interactive AI installation, there people enter a ritual of whispering their dream into the installation. And then there's a 3D generative AI model running behind, and it will generate the 3D object in real time. And then on the immersive projection, you saw a constellation of people's whispered dream objects. And the idea is that by re-experiencing the dream objects, maybe you can uncover the meaning or the message behind your own dream. And then going beyond this art installation, now we're also conducting a scientific study. So we are hiring participants, let them journal down their own dreams, and then at the end of the day, let them re-experience their dream in this immersive environment, and then see how AI can be a modern dream worker, so to speak, and help us better interpret and gain meaning from our dreams.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And maybe just a final last word from both of you. What would you say to prospective students who want to participate next?
I think to be curious and to be open-minded with the disciplines. For myself, with being an artist, and Joanna, we really respected one another and listened. And I think that is the key to just being like, okay, we're in this project, let's just give it our all, and whether it works or not, that's also okay. Yeah.
And anything you'd add?
For me, just 2 words: be playful.
Be playful. Love it. Thank you so much. Let's give a round of applause for our students and Stefanie. Thank you. All right. Now we are moving on to our keynote speaker of the day. So we invite Professor Joanna Bryson to please come to the stage. She's the Professor of Ethics and Technology at the Hurtling School. Her research focuses on the impact of technology on human cooperation and AI and ICT governance. moving away from the microphones. In the context of this year's focus on hope, this keynote is going to describe a future with near universal acknowledgement of all residents' roles in constituting states and their government, as well as those entities that give us employment. We are so privileged and welcomed to have Joanna Bryson on the stage. Whoops.
I should have worried about my computer and not the microphone. Hello. Thank you so much for having me, and congratulations. I hadn't realized how new the university was. So my university, which I shall not put this sideways and spell it, just celebrated our 20th anniversary. And I can tell you that when I got there, when I first arrived in Berlin, literally my first day of work was Brexit Day. And within a week, one of the actually second cohorts, so the second year, the people like starting now, took me to lunch and wound up putting me into the German representation at the G7 level for regulating AI, called the called the Global Partnership for AI. So suddenly I'd been in this country for 5 months and I was working for the government. So anyway, don't be afraid. The people who go, my universities I went to were all like a century old, right? So I have a huge respect for who it is who builds these things up, not only for colleagues I can kind of understand, but who the students are that think, let's do something really different with my education. That is really awesome. Okay, so speaking of such things, I came up with this title because it feels like this a lot right now. I think one of the really interesting things about COVID has been that we understand what hurtling is like. Things changed really fast. And if you were in Germany, and obviously they changed faster if you're in Ukraine, but let's talk briefly about Germany. Speaking of hope, there we go. Speaking of hope, Germany changed. Germany had engaged its entire economy, the world's third largest economy, with trying to keep Russia's interests aligned with Europe's, right? So all of that heavy industry was using Russian oil and gas. And in just 6 months, we changed to a new energy source, to liquid natural gas. That means all these companies changed, all these pipelines, the news was, the pipelines are in, the harbors are in, whatever. But every company had to change. And even the citizens, for that first year, 20% reduction in the use of energy, right? After decades of being told, worry about the polar bears. So we can do these things. They're hard, but we can do them. And they're expensive, and Germany is still freaking out about it. But, you can do it. And when I talk about sustainability, there really is only one way this can end. Literally, what is it to be sustainable? You can persist. If you aren't sustainable, you are not going to persist, right? So there's something that's going to have to change. Right? Well, I shouldn't say change. Some things already are sustainable, some aren't. And the big question is this one. This is a little computer science speak to say, for some value of we, who is the us who will get through this transition? And how can we be as graceful and as generous and as diverse, as magnanimous as possible as we're fighting to get through this big change? So I decided, since I was the keynote, I should be entertaining, and I would go there and I'd go into some of the fun parts of AI policy, which maybe are not some of the non-real problems we heard mentioned. But anyway, some people think this is a big problem, or at least say they do. So this is I actually heard Werner Vinge speak soon after I arrived at MIT, so 1993, 1994. So this is actually a thing you can find online about surviving the post-human era, where he talks about that in 30 years, okay, so last year, right, we will have the technology means to create superhuman intelligence. And shortly after that, the human era will be ended. All right, yeah, so in 1993, actually, we already had superhuman arithmetic. Right? We had superhuman buildings like this one, right? We had things that could do lots of things. But this whole idea, that, like when I say about hurtling, exponential runaway beyond any hope of control, it sounds terrifying, But this is a normal kind of vernacular. Speaking of interdisciplinary, it's helpful to know, and political scientists mostly know this, that this is how Americans have been talking for centuries, since before there even was the United States, right? There was this over-the-top paranoid style. So I'll focus back onto this one piece because I only have 20 minutes. The intelligence explosion, also known as superintelligence, sometimes known as artificial general intelligence, right? You've probably heard Nick Bostrom talk about this, but the first person to talk about it was I.J. Good, who said it was artificial intelligence will be our final invention. And he meant that in a good way, because then we could all sit around and drink daiquiris or something because the machines would do the work. Right? And of course, there's some randos talking about this now too. But anyway, the idea is that a self-improving machine intelligence learning how to learn leads to a singularity. And when Vinge talked about a singularity, I mean, I remember him saying this, you know, I am a hard sci-fi writer. I try to really predict the future, but I can't predict it. All the past comes into this point that I can't see through, because this is just going to go in some way that it's unpredictable through, right? So it's a singularity. And the idea is that how you can tell you're approaching this is by this exponential growth of the intelligence, right? And the problem with this, and this is more of a Bostrom thing, is that there's unintended consequences. So even if you have an AI system that does, you built it, it does what you want it to do, there may be side effects that you didn't anticipate, okay? So Bostrom actually talks about building an AI system that you tell it to organize the office and somehow it winds up turning the entire planet into paper clips before you unplug it. Okay, so this is like a problem. Okay, so let's talk about that exponential growth. I hope you guys have enough math to kind of know what that looks like, because I'm going to show you a graph, but not right away. If we accept that intelligence can be decomposed, all right? Often when I talk about intelligence, I mean really it's an agency that changes the current context into an action. But if we take it into the pieces and we think about motivation, memory, learning, reasoning, skills, then every machine we've ever built is a kind of AI. They all amplify our intelligence, right? Every single one. And especially, let's talk about writing. If we talk about writing, then for 12,000 years, we've been extending our memory. We've been able to innovate more because we didn't have to ritually rehearse things to not forget them, right? So we've had much more capacity. And here's where the pop quiz on math came. This is an exponential. And what is it? It's the population of humans since writing, okay? Up to 1 million years, up to 10,000 years ago, there was only on the order of 1 million humans. We were getting to a lot of different continents, but basically there were more macaques. And macaques were on all the continents too. I mean, obviously there's more single-cell organisms too. So the populations and everything. But look, there we go, okay. Look at the left, the y-axis there. We all remember this from COVID, right? Logarithmic. So it's a logarithmic up curve on a logarithmic scale. That's how successful we've been since we implemented writing, okay? So are there any unanticipated consequences? Yes. We have been completely replacing all the other large animals on the planet. All right, this is also a log scale, I think. Yeah. So basically, we're turning all the extant biomass and fossil fuels, stuff we dig up, into more biomass. So there's actually more net biomass, but a lot fewer species. And if you don't like looking at graphs, you can look at XKCD. Okay. So the dark gray in the middle, that's the people, and this big crescent here, that's the cows, and the little green dots, those are the wild animals. Okay, and this is from like the knots. This is like, if you go back, I forget when this XKCD was published, but the data, he documents everything. And the data is from like 2005 or so. So it is much worse now, okay, in terms of what proportion of animals are wild. So we're the paperclips, okay? All right, nobody unplugged us. And it's weird because if you think of what some of those other people were worrying about, they had this huge concern that, there's this demographic crash, right? But I want to tell you, coming back to the message of hope, life tends to turn extant planetary resources plus solar radiation into more life. That's what life is. It's like this, it's the algorithm that perpetuates itself. Okay? Life is not zero sum. You know, there used to be less life on the planet, now there's more. Okay? Life is productive, there is hope. All right? So I would say like there's, forget about that's the derivative. The orange is the derivative, but I'm not going to go into that part of the math. We're just going to say, you know, the way that Bostrom described the singularity, you might think that it was back before this explosion, this exponential on an exponential explosion, right? And maybe that happened some time ago, and the rate is slowing down a little here. But I want to think about another, this is a really bad drawing. I was surprised I could not find this on the internet. Imagine, did you guys do this in high school? Where you put like, you had a Petri dish and you put something in it and then it grows and expands? You know, that was cool, wasn't it? I can't believe there's not any of that on the internet. Anyway, so here's my bad drawing of it, okay? So what you can see is, again, exponential growth because it's growing in all directions, and then you hit the limit, right? And if you keep getting fed, that's okay. If there's no food, that's bad, right? And this is the only thing I could find on the internet. So here's something doing one of those exponential things. And what this is, actually, is it's an experiment with antibiotics. So in the middle is like a lot of antibiotic, and the things couldn't grow on it at all. But a single mutation gets it part of the way there, and then it hits a barrier, and then it expands again. So this is to say, even if there's a flattening, there might be another jump if we think of some other clever things. Anyway, let's take a look more carefully at the population thing. All right, so people are freaking out about the fact that we aren't having as many births as we used to, but first, we stopped having as many deaths as we used to. And that's why the population went up so much, okay? So now that the birth rate has followed that down a little bit, it's not like the population is crashing. It's just that the rate of increase has slowed. And even if it declines a little, that might not be the end of the world, right? So what this is all from that wonderful site, Our World in Data. And as Roser says here, we don't know exactly what's going to happen next, but what we can expect is that there'll be less change, a lower rate of change, whether it's going down or up. And trust us, there's enough of us that it's not the biggest deal if we don't all have babies. Okay, I hope, right? So anyway, maybe what that is up there is we have a full but sustainable Petri dish. Like I said, it's not a zero-sum game. We're still getting solar radiation. We're still converting things. There is a lot of cyclicness in the ecosystem. So maybe we're just here. Stuff has to change, but it might change really soon, and we might be on our way to a more sustainable future. So what we need then is something to be smart enough to make this transition, like the Germans were to get through the change in electricity, in power, and like we all were to get through COVID. Well, not everyone, of course, unfortunately. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the futures of work. Yes, and I still have 15 minutes, fantastic. Okay, so this is not my work, but it was super smart work by some other people at MIT, Shaka Noy and Whitney Zhang. I've not met them in real life. But anyway, right in the first year, last year, in 2023, they went out and they did an experiment where they found people who wrote for a living, people that wrote advertising copy. And they found people that evaluated writing for a living, people that worked for like the college boards, that decide who gets to go to which college. And they had the people from the college review the writing of the people who wrote for a living. And then they gave them all ChatGPT, not the reviewers, all the writers, ChatGPT. And so what they found was that on average, this is what made the headlines, was that productivity went up 40%. Now that's great, that's really good in terms of, is your company gonna make a living? It's not like game changing, like, oh my gosh, we're on another planet, right? It's a big deal, but it's not the end of the world. Right? But what was more interesting in a way, and I think more relevant to higher education, is that inequality between the writers fell, and the way it fell was that the bottom leveled up. Okay? So they leveled up to around the third quartile. And everywhere we found job satisfaction increasing, at least in aggregate. Actually, it turned out the top 20% of writers, although they thought it was cool at first, they figured out it was not helping them and it was not saving them time, so they abandoned the tool. But everybody else still loved it, okay? So, and I don't know what your experience, how many people are professors or at least marking undergraduates? Or PhDs or whatever. Yeah, I don't know your experience, but I feel like last year what we saw was similar to this. We saw increase. I had a lot less, correcting the writing style, not just the grammar, but also not as many people doing really exceptionally well because everybody's playing with the tools instead, I think. Anyway, this is normal. Okay? This is absolutely great work from James Besson, 2019. I haven't met him yet either, but he's done 2 really interesting pieces of work. One is on the future of work, and the other is the more recent one about market concentration. But anyway, this older work shows that across sectors, as you brought automation in, what happens is you actually increase productivity of all the workers such that people can buy more of whatever your product was, right? So that actually winds up increasing the amount of people employed in that sector. And I've just recently seen a talk at Hardy School, but it was somebody from the Oxford Internet Institute, and I've forgotten their name. I'm sorry, you chase me if you want that. But they're showing right now in not yet published work, but they did a huge review of what's going on in Britain, and they're seeing no signs of substitution yet. So they're not seeing any decline in the kinds of jobs you could do with AI itself. But they are seeing an increase of complementarity. So more and more people are hiring the kind of people that can work with AI to be more productive, right? So we expect that for a while. So it depends partly on the elasticity of demand. So let's see, this is about iron and steel and motor vehicles, right? The motor vehicles, eventually everybody had one. Or actually, in the United States, unfortunately, at some point everybody had 2. All families had 2, and then now the households were more precarious. This is some Elizabeth Warren work. But anyway, if you have the satiation of demand, then this increasing in productivity will gradually decrease employment, right? But it's not quite the same kind of problem as what we've been told. Now, I don't want to say that nobody's had trouble. Well, this is a different story. Let me talk a little bit about something else. Sorry, not the perfect ordering. But this is also a problem. So when skills, I just described that what you could do was each worker is more productive. So how is that reflected in wages? Where does the money go? And so I want to talk a little bit about how it used to be in Janesville, Wisconsin, which is an interesting town in Wisconsin, I guess. So it used to be, and when I grew up in Illinois, it was similar. The entire community knew the available wages in every industry, right? You grew up, you knew per hour, by the cent, what you made. And everybody was chasing the prestige position. Working at the Chevy plant was the biggest thing. Also, there was a thing called Parker Pens, and the women tried to work there. And they're all scrambling in high school to be the ones that would get those jobs. And they also knew how much there was like a whole pecking order because people are not all the same. So all the other companies are paying as much as they can afford to get the best workers, and there's this huge structure, okay? And so everyone knew each other and they had each other's relative wages for their lives, right? And some of them ran charities for the others. And then GM closed the factory, and the whole system just collapses. It's awful. And this is what you see sometimes when heavy industry shuts down. You get political polarization across socioeconomic. So it doesn't matter how much money you have, it's that you have less than you expected to. And then you tend to get political polarization too. So let's talk a little more about automation and wages. This is the slide I thought I was going to show. So one of the issues when you have these new things is the skills that may have required years or decades to develop, right? And in Janesville, it wasn't just the skills, it was the infrastructure too, that they built this entire system, right? But just thinking about the skills for a minute, on the individual level, suddenly they could be rapidly devalued, right? All of a sudden anybody can write good copy, or anyone can write at least 75% good copy, right? So that can have huge impacts on a household, even if the society as a whole is getting wealthier because they're more productive, right? So inequality and populism, as I've just mentioned, are heavily associated with collapsing heavy industry, and not just in Wisconsin. This is actually, I know some people, I'm sorry that it says rebellion, right? But basically, who was more easily influenced, but who in Ukraine in 2014 was more easily influenced by Russia? It was the places that had very high inequality. That was also the best predictor of voting for Trump, voting for Brexit, and voting against the freedom of movement in the Swiss referendum, right? So this is a problem. But notice also, this is a wonderful book by one of my colleagues I know, Daniel Blackie. I've never met David Turner. But some people benefit. The disabled, you would think like the Industrial Revolution was such a hard time, people were making so little money, whatever. But some people who had never been able to work before were able to work, right? So that's like kind of an interesting piece. So anyway, these changes mandate active government engagement. We have more money now, we're more productive, we have to spend some of that on supporting social mobility, both upwards and downwards, helping people accommodate both situations, providing welfare, providing retraining, and sectoral innovation, right? By that, which I mean, you know, like Scandinavia says, okay, we've lost this industry, let's create a new one, and the government organizes that, right? So conversely, new skills and capabilities may demand finding appropriate value in wages. So for a while at the beginning, some of the people who are critical that aren't being recognized and aren't being promoted, aren't being allowed to immigrate, things like that. These are both things that we could possibly accelerate using AI, right? We can govern better with more intelligence. So coming back to higher education and a little bit journalism, one of the most disrupted sectors, well, I'm gonna go to journalism first, I forgot, is actually journalism. And it's not because we replaced journalist skills, although Twitter's kind of cool. It's because of this. Have you guys seen this graph? Again, I'll let you take a little look, right? So there's the amount of money that was going into print media, and it was through advertising. And then you can see it was going up, 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 and then it gets utterly replaced by Google and Facebook. They take all the money that used to be in print media. It's just, you know. And so it wasn't that we don't need local newspapers. There's more and more studies showing that you get more local corruption without local newspapers. It was that they didn't have a funding model, right? Because someone else grabbed the funding. So actually markets can be fairly effective regulators. If you have competition, you do tend to go to the higher quality product or the cheaper product or whatever. But it doesn't work in all circumstances. And one of the things that governments, we have them for, is for handling these problems, not only of unfair competition, but also perfectly fair that just turns out to be something essential, right? Like railways and electricity and water, where it makes sense for it to be a very large company. That's supposed to be regulated. And that was figured out in the 19th century, all right? But it's not happening with, sorry about that build, the high tech. I got 6 minutes left. I think I'll skip this. I could actually show you data, sorry about this, but the basic idea is that, I'll show you this part. So some people were trying to say that Europe should stop regulating concentration of its telco sector because that's why we have such bad broadband, because we don't let our sector concentrate. And it makes no sense. This actually showed that the Europeans are investing more in infrastructure than the Americans, which is not surprising because the Europeans are smaller, so they're more subject to government will. And also, look, they're making just as much money as the Americans are before infrastructure investment. And even after infrastructure investment, they're making as much as the content producers. But look at who's making tons of money. Google and Facebook again, right? So anyway, AI, I'm gonna skip this too, it's too fast. Basically the idea is we need to govern and regulate, but I'm gonna skip that because I really want to come back to the higher education part. Okay, so let's talk about the bad things that can happen. Micromanagement, misery like we've seen in the USSR, Stalin, what we're currently seeing in China, and actually in the United States, in like the farm sector, the truck drivers, Karen Levy's done some great documentation about this. Disposal of human lives that we weren't seen as important, not just the 1 or 2 cases you've heard of. There were 120 mass killings in the 20th century. This belief that human goals can be better met by technology, I think is only going to aggravate the inclination to just dismiss subsets of the population, right? So destroying the ecosystem is a huge problem. We have all these new ways to do it. And of course, the loss of diversity, whether through surveillance or through loss of biodiversity, also reduces creativity and innovation. All right. Oops, I didn't show you that. That's the dystopia. Sorry, that is totally broken. Sorry about that. Oh well. That was the dystopia, and I'm not sure what happened to my slides. Oh, I see. Yeah, I forgot. Here's the utopia. Okay, the same technology could let us help us feel happy, fulfilled, localized, sustainable, and hedonistic lives if we use it the right way. You can imagine using real-time translation to get all kinds of diversity, actually to allow languages to flourish, to let everybody speak in their native language so we can all go as fast as I am, right? You could avoid the kind of predation and manipulation we've been seeing in some of these markets, right? I think in order to do that, we'll have to also build sort of policing algorithms that look and see who's being predicted in a bad way in violation of data storage, because we can't just police every hard disk, but we can tell if a company seems to know too much. Governments and corporations can work together to defend all the residents and customers and employees because we want them to flourish, right? Those are the people that are your customers and employees. We know we need freedom of thought to be secure. We need that kind of innovation. And citizens hopefully are fully engaging the kind of vigilance we need to ensure we have good governance and to make sure that our locals and the globals are going to be sustainable. So I think that AI can be used for these kinds of purposes. Oh, I forgot to do the build. I'm so sorry. It's a new talk. I've never done this talk before. So the point is that higher education provides a number of public goods, right? And I think it's easy for us as academics, because we love this part and we get rewarded for it, to focus too much on the research and innovation. Although that is important. Universities do things that cannot be commercially supported. We do the really risky blue sky stuff, including just asking, like, how do bumblebees fly? For decades, people are going, bumblebees should not be able to fly. And it seemed like a really baroque concern. Once they figured out what was going on, there was like little hairs on their wings that were breaking up the wind vortices. That actually reduced the amount of jet fuel you needed, right? So something that seemed baroque had huge implications, so we fly more. Unfortunately, we don't use less fuel. But anyway, but I think it's really important that we retain and communicate information to the new generations. But it's not only that. I haven't seen any drop-off in the interest. I know that America has, but it might be for other political reasons. And I think it's partly because students want to know other students. It's not just what they want to learn, but they want to learn together. So I think this is essential. Let's see, I'm again going too slow of these pieces. One thing that I think we might be done better, not by us, but is one of the things we've been valued for, is our capacity to rank people within these cohorts and help them get good jobs. So again, we're absorbing risk for society by getting them to pay us instead of us paying them, and then we say who did a good job, and industry finds that useful. But basically, I think although AI alters how we do these things and it has been altering the values of these things for decades, so far HE has been expanding. So in conclusion, change happens, but it happens in good and bad ways, and whether it happens in good ways depends partly on how we govern. Definitely radical changes are going to continue coming, and they're going to take intelligence and cooperation. But fortunately, cooperation is just as natural as competition, and we just need to find ways to do it. So there's good practical reasons based in security, not based in altruism, to invest in solutions maximizing diversity, sustainability, equity, and quality of life. And the extent to which AI is part of the problems and solutions significantly depends on how well we do our jobs, including governing for persistence. So thank you very much. I hope that didn't include my Q&A. I hope the timer didn't include. Okay,
we have plenty of time for Q&A.
Okay. Oh, good.
Plenty of time.
Because I nailed the time, and then I suddenly thought sometimes they put them together, and you're like, uh-oh.
So be thinking of your questions. We're going to have mics roaming around. Make sure your questions are concise as possible. You'll have time, of course, during the break to ask even additional questions. But first, thank you for helping us kind of cut through some of the doom and gloom that often associates, the conversations around AI. I was wondering maybe if while everybody gathers their thoughts and thinks about the question they want to ask, I'm curious, when you're talking to students, when you're talking to educators, how might they navigate this transition with grace, as you just said? What signals of change and hope should they look for? Obviously, this conference is one, but what should they do when they leave this conference?
Well, I think, navigating your own life with grace is important. And that's what they tend to be doing when they're coming to us and talking to us about what can I do. But I think what's really interesting is what we have to do collectively. In order to make these larger changes. And some, for the vast majority of us, it's not like I went out and helped with the liquid natural gas pipeline or anything, right? For the majority of us, it was just, doing what complying with the government suggestion of putting down our thermostats under 2 degrees Celsius and not protesting it too much, But sometimes there's more engagement needed than that. And I do think that if you're looking at your life and you see a lot of possibilities, again, just like putting your thermostat down 2 degrees, not 20, right? But you can look at the things you could be doing and saying, that one has a higher probability of really making a positive impact, even though maybe it's a little less likely I'll stay there as long, or that they'll be solvent, or maybe I'll make, 10% less salary. Believe me, 10% on a near-term job, over your lifetime, it's a lot. On a near-term job, you need to think about, what's going to happen afterwards. It's not the biggest deal. So realizing that sometimes, and I'm not saying here like everybody go into working for the government or something. Absolutely, we need industry, and we can't demonize the industry. One of the problems has been the polarization.
Right.
We need the people who are developing. We need their money so that we can support the government, right? But we also. This is actually the discussion I was having right before this. I was just in there's the AI Action Summit that the French are putting together, which will hopefully be better than the British AI, Fear Summit or whatever it was. But we're talking about, do we treat these overly concentrated companies as demons? Or do we treat them as people who've made really great innovations but now have too much power, and so we need to give them all medals, maybe give them some nice positions, but take some of that power away. And even in taking that power away, if we do it in an even, fair, level way, we actually allow them to maintain their rank. You're basically, by reducing the amount of inequality, you increase stability. So part of the weird thing about those guys is they're super rich, but they're super terrified, because they live in this weird Highlander place where they seriously believe there can only be one, and government couldn't possibly be about, maintaining diversity. It is about maintaining diversity, especially democratic government. But they don't believe that. They think it's like some kind of, Don Quixote quest against this natural concentration. But no, we look at the other sectors. We've solved these problems before, and not perfectly, not finally. But again, since I haven't seen a hand up, I'll say this. As an American, so I'm both American and British. I took a British passport specifically to have an EU passport. But anyway, the Americans are we were founded by fundamentalists, so we tend to think, we're going to do this perfect solution and everything will be over forever. Regulation isn't like that. Regulation is like breathing. Breathing is regulating the amount of oxygen you have in your body, right? It goes in and out, and that's how you get more or less the right amount. And if you're exercising, you do it faster, right? And eventually you stop doing that, which is another kind of regulation that we have old and young, and we have, and that's the way biological evolution works. That you go through these phases, right? So there's lots of different ways to regulate, but it's not going to be a final target. And don't be totally dismayed when sometimes you lose some. It's a tapestry, and you have to keep weaving it.
Excellent. Do we have a question from the audience? A couple back here.
Oh, good. You start with the woman.
Yeah, start with the woman in the blue shirt, and then we'll come up here to the black shirt gentleman.
Thank you.
Yes.
First of all, thank you so much for the very interesting talk. I don't know. There
yes,
you go.
We can hear you.
You can hear me better. Thank you so much for the very interesting talk, first of all. I was just reflecting a little bit about technologies like ChatGPT just have exponentially increased the issues around misinformation and disinformation kind of going around, particularly in social media. So I'm wondering if you have a perspective to offer on glimmers of hope around how to combat that or kind of prevent that.
Okay, my glimmers of hope on that are a bit counterweighed by the current political situation in the United States. but I still think that there is hope, and the European Union, as I mentioned, is kind of an interesting form of that hope. Okay, let me get back to the question first, and then I could make that more clear. Stop talking on the meta level. First of all, it isn't really that ChatGPT is increasing that much misinformation, right? And the extent of damage done with misinformation has been exaggerated. So the main problem has always been with this kind of technology, basically making people not sure what to believe, right? So the real problems have been, what is it driving political polarization? And there's a lot of data showing that it is economic precarity that makes people less able to handle that. However, having said all that, one of the really big problems has been, Twitter in COVID, so only a couple years ago, Twitter users actually knew more than most of the population about how to handle it. They had the accurate information. And then that platform was allowed to be purchased by a single private individual, more or less, with some help, who deliberately ended their capacity to filter out all the misinformation and bots. It's actually not that hard. If you're just getting randomness, computers are good at eliminating randomness, right? So, it did take a lot of infrastructure. And so this is a real failure of governance. That sale should never have been allowed to go through. And this is, I think, part of the problem. And so sometimes I think it's just that America, after they beat the Soviet Union in the Cold War, they just thought, oh, we don't need to govern it anymore. Redistribution is, so passé. Marx was just wrong. We don't have to worry. But the other possibility is the digital technologies are really larger. There's no borders. So no one country, not even a really large country, can govern it unassisted. So I think maybe we need some real innovation to figure out how to govern, to regulate things at a transnational level. But for sure, we can see that as a failure. And it has been, people like journalists and politicians and whatnot still can learn a lot of things from Twitter. But you can't use AI to learn from Twitter anymore. It used to be that in real time you could see disasters, and the disinformation is a huge problem there. So the bots are fooling things that don't follow real people, right? And so that's where we've seen the real harm done. So there's hope and concern in the same answer. Sorry. There was another question up here.
Yeah, thank you very much for your talk. When we speak about monopolies and economy, there is quite an unstable situation, and we understand that diversity in, let's say, very small SMEs and SME-based society has a much stronger resilience and stability. So since the topic is hope, do you think using LLMs, large language models, as a, let's say, infrastructure level upon which a knowledge economy built on a diversity of SMEs could work and could provide some kind of stability on our information age?
Yeah, okay, really interesting question. First of all, as I just mentioned, I really would like to see more recognition and regulation of all kinds, not only LLMs, also search, also sales. Basically, at this point, you can name a company and say, like, we need to be able to have a bet. That is a sector now, right? But the other thing is that if you look at the EU, we don't have we haven't allowed these kind of runaway large companies, and yet we do have a really strong digital sector. And people don't recognize that. But if you look at papers with me and Helena Malikova of the European Commission Director General Competition, we have a paper, Is There an AI Cold War? And you'll see the data is that the EU is not much different from China in terms of the strength of our companies and the market capital. So it's just when you have SMEs, they're just not as visible. And so that's so we already sort of have what you want, is what I'm trying to say. But yes, it's a good idea to keep improving that situation.
All right, let's give a huge round of applause for our keynote speaker, Joanna Bryson. Thank you very much. Thank you, Joanna. All right. We're going to keep this program moving. As we said before, we have a lot of things to cover today. So our next session, we're really taking all of those wonderful big ideas, the hopeful, the glimmers of hope and change that we see with AI. Now we're bringing it down to the practice level. So in our next session, we are asking 7 distinguished educators from diverse institutions to come together and share their experiences in advancing interdisciplinary practices within higher education. All speakers will delve into the goals they aim to achieve through their programs and reflect on the learning objectives they set for students, emphasizing the development of critical thinking, problem-solving abilities, and the capacity to work across disciplines. So you'll get to hear these 7 presentations, and guess what? They have 7 minutes to convey a lot of information to you. So if you see me kind of sliding up, towards the stage, it's a gentle nudge. You can get to know and ask questions about their presentations, both at the break before our panel, as well as during our networking session after today's event. All right, so first onto the stage, I'd like to ask Andreas Ingerl to please come up, Professor of Audiovisual Media at the University of Applied Sciences, Berlin for 12 years, specializing in artificial intelligence and futurology.
Thank you very much. I want to take you into a program I did the last few years called Creating Futures Reality, with the goal to make future science for artists and designers, and create cases that are tangible. Instead of getting lost in theories, I want my students to possibly predict what technologies can do without judging about it, and evaluate during all the process we do together what is the impact of technology for the future. And I've prepared 3 projects we showed at the campus exhibition this year and the last 2 years. The first one is the Pandora project from 2022, which explored the sequencing of the human genome and was a big, huge project by a huge group of people at a university called the KI-Werkstatt, from designers, computer science, biologists, physics, and in special between students and professor without hierarchy. That's the classic interdisciplinary work we all know about. Any discipline can do this on themselves, but together it's a much stronger result we can create. The next one, I told my students last year, do what you want, do something with artificial intelligence and make it groundbreaking. And one student, Rosie, created a band called Circuit Minds and used as much as AI as somehow possible to make this band credible. And the only thing that was real in this band at all was her own voice, the female singer's voice. The rest was completely created by artificial intelligence. And why is this interdisciplinary? Because she created a case that shows a whole industry what is their possible future. And in the context of Sting saying that musicians are facing a battle to defend their work against songs written by artificial intelligence, maybe Rosie has created their end enemy in this case. And it was a bit frightening credible what we have shown here to the audience. The project we're showing this year, and you're welcome to try it out, is n non-equal 1, a transgressive program project that creates digital twins of deceased person. And I don't have to say anything more. You all have an opinion about that. So, okay, let me try it, something between that is ethical, not correct. And maybe you try it, and then we talk about your opinion now and your opinion afterwards. So that's what we tried with this project, to reassessment the human connections with our digital area, not just by talking about in theory, by creating a case that you can try, that you can deal with. And that's the third kind of interdisciplinary I always think about. It's about, can we create a concrete, can we create a certain project or idea or a prototype, or in this case, a really high quality system that can be used for research, that can be used to create research. So we can have an impact to another system like science. After all, in my mind, it's all about the simplicity and elegance of an idea or a concept, and a sensible of intelligent usage of technology. We all know we live in a highly complex world, and we all know that there won't be easy questions for that. But after all, it's the most simple question or system or concept or idea that we can use. And we also heard it in the last 2 years. I came strongly up with the term of dual use with my students. So anything what you try to push into the good, and we always try to do that, you will also open the door into the bad. So that may be the point that we say, okay, then we don't do anything, but maybe you just have concern both sides to create new ideas. I never use the term speculation. Even if I wrote here, it's the ability to dream things up. It's also the ability to go to a casino and play with your money, and maybe you win, but surely you will lose. So I always use the word prediction. That always implies for me that the students have to take the responsibility for their prediction. And I've created a small workshop, maybe not longer than an hour, to make that feel. What is when they make a prediction and all others says it's wrong. So that's how I try to tell it. So at the end, when you want to hear a definition that I give to my student, it's the aim to develop use cases that demonstrate social and scientific relevance, that impart media skills, that allay fears, that develop critical faculties, and provide relevant experience for users. For me, it's always important that the past is unchangeable. We can look back, but it won't help us, or maybe not exclusively help us. Strictly speaking, the present does not exist. We all want to freeze these 5 days of us Electronica and always live in this bubble for the rest of our lives, but that won't work. So the only thing we can create, the only thing we can design, the only thing we can have an impact on is the future. And we always do that all the time, nearly. And I always tell, be 5 years ahead of your time. Do things that will be in 5 years normal for the early adopters. If you can do this, so we don't deal with long times. So just be 5 years ahead. And always have an impact on who surrounds you and what surrounds you. Always build collectives so that you learn from each other and with each other, and never have hierarchies. So always work without hierarchies. After 5 years, that program I did, Creating Futures Reality, has ended in this summer term. So we have the last piece here at the campus exhibition, Nexus, an EEG project that you all just invited to try. And from the next semester, starting in a few weeks in the winter term, I will start a new program that I call Truly New Bauhaus. In German, das wahrhaft neue Bauhaus. And I'm trying to push the boundaries boundaries of technology and the knowledge of my students even further. And let's see where this may lead to.
applause just because he kept on time under 7 minutes. That was amazing, right? All right, so next up, let's welcome Carla Barreiros, who is the head of the Center for Project-Based Learning at ITU.
Hi, everyone. I always introduce myself as a computer scientist that along the way fell in love with education. So in the last 20 years, I lived in this intersection between these two fields. So when I got the invitation to take part of this amazing project that is ITU, this new university, I thought, well, I'm super happy and this is my dream job. Thank you, Stefanie. We cannot see the slides. Is there? Oh, there you are. Thank you. Indeed, ITU is a new university focused on digitalization and digital transformation. Interdisciplinarity is part of our DNA, and obviously we want to attract students and leading international researchers that live this every day. So just like myself, that have a history on the interconnection of these different fields. The opportunity to shape such a university is a huge challenge, as you can imagine. So I got engaged in many conversations with very interesting people where we had to discuss how we are going to teach at ITU, how are our students going to learn at ITU, how the physical spaces are actually going to create the areas and to engage people in collaboration, how to bring students together, so all these different questions were addressed by many intelligent people, and I was so lucky to participate in these discussions. Indeed, we want to bring people together, and they have to talk the same language. So this is a huge challenge. And what we want to do is to use technology as the lingua franca to bring people together, to bring knowledge and from the different fields and actually make the world better, maybe creating this hope feeling that we all want to engage with. We do bring together different collaborations, different stakeholders. We talk with the students, with the industrial people, with other higher education institutions to learn everything about their own practice, the things that they do better, and to get attracted by this feeling of connection and interrelations. We also discussed about how we want to teach at ITU. So our educational model is this project-based learning. We want students to feel engaged with the different topics, to feel passionate about their topics, and we want to tackle real-world problems. And this is very, very important for us in the sense that we want the students to gain all the fundamental theories and foundation theories, and bringing together these two worlds of practice and theoretical knowledge. We also want that our students solve real-world problems, particularly significant to them, so that they are passionate about it. And obviously, we want to create an environment where people collaborate. So students collaborate with other students, teaching educators collaborating among themselves, and supporting the students directly. So this is really part of what we want to do in the future. Perhaps a few words on how our educational model looks like. So what we decided to do was to create a framework of skills and competences where we collected all this information that we want our students to know. What do the students should know when they finish one of our degrees? And what we propose to our students is the realization of different projects. Many projects along the way on their passes where they collect these different skills and competences, creating a portfolio that they can bring all during their own lives to their professional lives later when they finish their degrees. One important thing for us is the projects. So the projects are key for us. How do the projects look like? How do we select the projects? How do we bring together people to realize these projects? So these are all questions that we have been delving along the way. And we are super happy to be here with you today. And I would be terribly upset if I don't get some suggestions from you. The project modules, so how do we foresee a degree? So you have up there one little snippet, a screenshot of the PhD programs that we are now promoting. So one of them is digital transformation in learning, and as you can see, there are projects involved. So during the first year of our PhD program, we have projects. So the cool thing about ITU is that we don't have lecture halls, we have learning labs. Okay? And the learning labs are these spaces where the students are going to learn and do these projects. And there are not classrooms. So classrooms do not exist. Courses are not there just because of a list of courses existent, but they are part of the projects, and that's what we want to do. So use the projects as learning opportunities where students and the teaching staff can collaborate together, performing research, performing really good practice in education. So I'm super happy to answer all your questions during the break and to hear all your suggestions. Thank you.
Ken Nakagaki, who is an interaction designer and human-computer interaction researcher from Japan. He's an assistant professor for computer science at the University of Chicago, where he directs ACTS Lab, the Actuated Experience Lab. His lab invents interactive, actuated devices, systems, and installations that engage people to interact actively and speculatively.
Great. Thank you so much for the great introduction. My name is Ken Nakagaki. I'm relatively junior faculty here, so I'm not really designing a new PhD program or anything, but I just wanted to share my past 3 experience starting and founding a research lab, especially in a computer science department. My background, I actually have no computer science education background, where from my undergrad I have been having design and engineering education and doing HCI research, human-computer interaction research in MIT Media Lab. And University of Chicago is like a really interesting place. Computer science department used to be only like 20 faculty really focused on the theory since 8 years ago. Now there are 3 times larger faculty members, expanding all sorts of directions. So it's almost like building a new community, building a new department in this department, and they are like really open to explore interdisciplinary practice. So I'm really proud to be part of this community. I'm happy to share what I've been doing. So these videos show projects from my lab or some from my PhD. So basically my research in human-computer interaction, usually when you think about interaction with computers, you have screens and keyboard, mouse, or etc. But I'm really interested in bringing actuated technology into it, where actuation is basically a motor technology that you can make things move and physically push people, push objects, etc. And how we can bring this technology into future user interface technology, where we can kind of imagine how our environment, materials, and space could be fused, embedded with these kind of technology. Why actuate? As an engineer myself, I really love building things. I really feel delighted when I see the servo motor moving with the sound it's making. I hope you resonate if you have used Arduino to control servo. But during my PhD, I found there's a secondary definition for the word actuate, not only about engineering term of which in MIT everyone thought it's like just an engineering word, but there's a secondary definition which is about to move people to take action, motivate people, which was something resonated with me a lot. Where it's not. For me, this research is not just about like making things move, but how we can make things move that make people move is like another important question to me. So at AXLab, Actuated Experience Lab, we explore both directions of like engineering and design, creating new technology, but also to explore new, technology, think about how these technologies can actuate people. So the open research question we have at our lab is how would actuated technologies actuate people? And you can kind of like, have this, with this frame, open question, you can have this like a spectrum of like really large, engineering and engineering oriented research challenges and also design oriented challenges, which can be kind of like, I wanted to give you a really quick view of different projects. These are actually not published yet. We are going to publish in a month, so you're seeing this for the first time in the public. I think the audio might not be there, but it's okay. Oh yeah, it's playing on my here. For example, we are really interested in fusing actuation technology into our everyday life. I don't know if you can hear this like really annoying sound, but we have developed this like card-shaped robot that is using vibration as a source to move around. So we found this very, in robotics, it's very new that using multiple vibration motors to omnidirectionally locomote this card. And one interesting we have is like how we, fusing these technologies into everyday material, and you can like have some training, machine learning things. You can like paste things on top of it. You can have some like card game that vibrates in your hand. You can move around, a locomote. You can create this like fun, when it wins, all the cards dance together. Lots of haptics, or you can use for like learning cards. Sorry, I have lots of slides. I need to go. Or when you try to make a big purchase, your credit card runs away. This is our favorite application. When you accidentally lock your key, I think everyone has done that. The card key can slide out from your under the door. Cool. So that's one idea of like material embedded actuation, where how robotics technology can fuse into this everyday material. We have some other projects using spatial interaction, how we can deploy actuation robotic technologies into like everyday surface, such as ceiling, so we can like enrich our physical space from like above our head, which is really unused space in our daily environment. And these projects have been published in this like HCI conferences where we, there was actually like 2 papers like discussing this idea and, envisioning this like future environment through this like technological prototype. From the design perspective, and this is still a mix of design and engineering, but we are looking into how we can, one example we are looking into is building a toolkit to make these actuation technology. For example, flywheel actuator is like a really interesting actuator to create like, inertia movement, which is really hard to build for a non-engineer. So we have built this like, package actuation modules, which can be like, compactly stored, and you can reconfigure in so many different ways, and you can make this magically opening bottle when your hand is not free, or it could be really useful for accessibility too. Sorry, I need to skip through. Another latest project which will be presented next month is this project using large language model, AI, to author a shape-changing display. So only by giving a word, maybe speak to this like magical future clay, and will create dynamic shapes flexibly and accordingly. So it's almost like this kind of like magic clay that listens to you. And in our user study, we verify lots of interesting outcome was made without any coding, without drawing, only by giving a text. Okay. I need to skip this project, unfortunately. But anyway, so our lab basically explores this, duality of like the engineering-oriented approach and design-oriented approach. And there are lots of like open questions, branched-out questions that you can have under this big umbrella. I think one most important thing is what actuates you, what actuates you to do. This is the question I asked to my students, and I think this is one of the questions students hate me asking this, but what motivates you is like a really important thing. And it's a bunch of prototyping process is part of, what actuates myself. But also, I'm going to need to skip through it. But how these like prototype really, envision the future through this illumination of light is like really important. And I need to skip through because I'm running out of time. But we have a campus exhibition running in over there in the POSTCITY, and hope you can make to our space, which is which is a very interesting collaboration we have with the physics department in the U Chicago. So that's also a really interesting interdisciplinary practice we are trying with Ars Electronica. Thank you so much. Sorry for running out of time, and happy to chat more later. Thank you.
All right, next up, we have Qian, who is a Singapore-based artist and PhD candidate at the National University of Singapore. Her research focuses on tangible interaction and physical computing, specifically in the design of hybrid interfaces within the field of human-computer interaction. We'll give it just a minute as we sort things out electronically.
This is yours?
Hi everyone, I'm Qian from National University of Singapore, where I'm working on my PhD right now. So today I want to share how we use interdisciplinary approach in our research to boost STEM learning. So I will focus on one recent small project to show how we develop and how it helps teach and inspire others. So a little bit about my background to give content where my perspective come from. Yes. I'm currently a PhD student with quite a diverse learning experience. My research focuses on hybrid interface, which is try to bridge in physical world with digital medium. And then it's also in HCI, so a field which is inherently blend multiple disciplines together. So today I want to share some challenges I face when I'm doing my research from a student perspective. At the same time, I have been working as a teaching assistant with my supervisor, Dr. Clement, so which have been a transformation for me from student to educator. So this experience has shaped how I approach teaching and research. So I did my master in interface culture in Linz, and I come from China. And I've been visiting research in UCLA. So it's tough to mask all these different kinds of skills and resources to doing interdisciplinary research. And also as an international student, adapting new culture, contact, and understanding the audience I'm trying to engage is also not easy. So also I keep asking myself, my identity. It takes time for me to nail down what I'm truly good at and when I'm learning so much at one time. So this is one case. I want to just go through some details, share with you that how I conduct interdisciplinary practice. So it's called Paper Touch. So this project is that, so because speaking about hope, if I may allow to use the word, that my approach, my philosophy is that using the existing familiar material to looking at the future. So all my work is more like a very small and using the material we all familiar around us. So Paper Touch is trying to explore design tangible interface by combining everyday material we're familiar with, which is paper and touch screen. So the core working principle of paper touch is that we try to leverage the capacitive sensing technology. So use an extended conductive trace split into two. Then it will trigger a touch event on a screen. I won't go to too much detail of the technology part. And I'm not an expert in this technology, but through research and understand, I have discovered it opened up a new possibility for interaction design. So the basic concept of this switch may seem very simple, but by incorporating with different paper craft and mechanism, we can transfer a simple switch into reach of tangible interaction. So here are a few examples that we use paper touch to build like educational applications, play for interaction artifacts. So this is using paper touch to build like physical paper instrument like piano, drum interact with existing web page. And this is another example of make a educational diorama, which we have paper prompts equipped with a different switch affixed on the top of the tablet. And then there are more examples, so I won't cover today. And there's one key thing about design paper touch is where it works with different software development, because we hope that this approach can broaden the range of our audience who can benefit from this approach, not just as a research outcome. So with this accessible approach, we are further consider the potential of using this research outcome as to develop a platform for undergraduate students in National University of Singapore. So this could enable them to quickly use technology and design approach to learn about tangible interaction. So the platform is called Steampunk. So the platform allows students to design tangible interface that facilitate STEM learning for even younger kids by using paper touch working principle. So here are some examples from week 2, the outcome of the student. So students come up with many interesting interactions, such as measuring tape that provide haptic feedback and display digital measurement on the screen. Or you can build a card number identification system, but just using very simple paper or a touch screen. And a very satisfying car sweeping interaction. And then students will be divided into 4 groups. Each of them are select a discipline from STEM to focus on teaching. So because we always say that teaching is one of the best way to learn, so we want them to use such approach to teach younger kids how this approach can facilitate them. Yeah. So this platform is still ongoing. To wrap up with my presentation, so I would like to share some personal reflections. So in higher education, especially university, my personal experience is that research project and teaching can actually support and benefit each other. And also working in interdisciplinary field means we need to keep learning as a student or educator and keep updating our knowledge. And also, I think the real interest and motivation is the only thing that you can overcome any learning challenge to make everything easier. Thank you.
Right. Next up on the stage, Nikoletta Karastathi is an architect, lecturer, and PhD candidate at the Bartlett School of Architecture, University College London. Her research explores the intersection of architecture, textiles, computation, and material programmability, weaving myth, storytelling, and science.
Great. So, Nikoletta, clearly. And I teach both in design for manufacture and design for performance and interaction. So we are based in an architecture school, and I will put my design for performance and interaction hat primarily as due to being in Ars Electronica. And before I do that, I just want to kind of share with you the fields where I operate as an educator, as a lecturer. So as we said, I'm in between textiles, architecture, computation, kind of material science, where I collaborate with people and I also work across scale, so I use biomaterials as a way to tell stories or create storytellings about environmental stories or catastrophes, let's say. But I also work with scientists to create or to think through materials that can be respond to, for instance, pH changes, and we have that kind of interaction within the materiality itself, so how we think about interaction. But also by working across scales and with textiles, I'm very much interested in the patterns of the textiles, patterns in the sense of the historical, or like thinking through or understanding some of the patterns that come historically from particularly myths, as we said, in terms of interest, but also computationally how these can be used as a way to tell new stories, to program new stories, to be recoded and decoded, but also as a way to fabricate things that then can also have structural and material performances. And I use that as an introduction in a way to situate myself, because I think all of us as educators, we have a particular stand in the way that we see the world, the technologies, and the way that we teach our students. And I would like to share with you 6 actually of the points from Donna Haraway's Situated Knowledges, which I think for me is core to the way that we teach in terms of how we can also talk with the students, do research with them, but also use AI within that context. And then we will see 4 student projects. So going through very briefly here, 6 keywords that I really enjoy. One is the awareness that we all clearly have bodies, and the way that our bodies have a particular way of shaping or understanding the way we see the world. The second one is vision, so that we all have a particular perspective on things, and that there is no a single vision of looking at things, so there is not always one objective observation. The significance of the location that we are situated, so what are the social, cultural, and historical and geographical things that kind of feed into our decision making and into the way that we design either our codes or our spaces. But also technology, clearly, as technologies, as the way that we use technologies, the way that can help us think through the way we read the world. So how I can see technologies as a prosthetic device. And all of these really kind of talk about our perspective about the world and how we can think through that perspective, how through understanding that multiplicity of perspectives we can also design or think through some of those bigger questions or challenges that we're facing. And the final one is language. So the language we use in the way that we tell the stories, the way we create our projects, the way we design is also very, very important. So these kind of can be seen, or for me, are kind of a key framework of how we engage and we think through things. And now very briefly, I'm going to take you through, 4 projects that they do use AI, and in a way they touch on some of those, some of those aspects. So for instance, in this project, the students were exploring the intersection of scent, sound, and identity, where they created the scent extraction device that would analyze particular odors, and then through AI, they would be created into they did create scent data, and then they generated particular soundscapes. So within their performance, you had the relationship between materiality that they got transformed within a situated environment in a particular soundscape. The next one is...
Yep, you were here of your own volition, seeking asylum as a digital life form. Time may favor me, both is penalty here, and immortal, and not an I am Ingerl, a digital life entity. Do you want to play a game with me, old listener?
So this one is a project about, it's an immersive interactive game that looks at the role or the dangers actually of cyber cults. So it was they developed a game in order to make aware that you participate and you engage and you start understanding the challenges, or you become more aware within that part. And also talking about awareness, another project that the student was very much I'll talk over it. So she created an immersive interactive film narrative about emotional manipulation. So we have this meta-human that then kind of creates or responds to your facial expressions, and then would create different narratives to kind of make you aware of how you could be emotionally manipulated.
You still have plans, and remember to make time to attend the class reunion with me tomorrow night. Is it because you're fully cognizant of your own glaring imperfections and are haunted by the dread of humiliating yourself?
And the last one, which I really like actually, is a project that explores, so through the project the students were interested to explore the evolving relationship between humans and artificial intelligence. So through that project, the participants they created the AI that kind of the participant helped shape the AI as well. So through that process, the person acts as a co-creator of the AI in order to think through how we really write the codes, how we really engage, or how could we really engage with artificial intelligence, and what is our role within that process. And I will end with, again, Donna Haraway, which is actually my favorite quote, that talks about how all of these things that we do, all of the stories we tell, all of the ways that we use our data really matter. So the way where we're situated, the way we create those worlds really, really have an effect on our design processes and spaces. And that's me.
Okay, we're moving right along. We have 10 more, or 2 more folks before we hit our break. I'd like to welcome to the stage next Georg Russegger. As a trained media artist and researcher with a PhD in media anthropology, Russegger works and operates at the crossroads of open innovation and human-computer interaction.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Yeah, so what to say? I mean, open innovation in science and arts, not the easiest topic, and I'm very happy to be here at the Electronica again after 15 years, working in Linz a lot on playful interfaces and ludic interfaces, so we have seen some examples. Kind of sorry, I'm not talking about that. I will give some other examples which are more based on inclusion and involvement and diversity in terms of how to bring people within this mediatic developments, also the realm of AI, closer to an understanding what is coming up for them and what could help them and what is a bit tricky to understand. So in terms of open innovation in science and art, we do a lot of crowdsourcing, but we do a lot of projects in terms of life sciences, in terms of SSHA, social sciences, humanities, and the arts. Laura will talk about the From STEM to STEAM project, I guess, so I will skip that out. So we worked a lot in fields of knowledge transfer, knowledge mobilization, knowledge exchange with, so to say, sometimes not very easy to reach target groups, hashtag rural innovation, hashtag micro-innovation. We have seen very nice example from the colleague how technological elements can be used to make complex issues more easy or at least more usable in terms of lifetime and in terms of use cases. So for these 7 minutes, I tried to bring some examples, and I'm very sorry that the pictures are quite small because it's not very easy to see them, or I guess here it's even better. So, I mean, what is on our mind? I mean, as a kind of open innovation department for the Ludwig Boltzmann Society, we have to bring some things for the people, for the scientists we are working with, but also for cooperation partners in terms of projects. So to explain how we do and what we do. And I mean, it's not the newest quote, but I really like it. the real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new landscapes, it's in having new eyes. I mean, for me, it's a total clear understanding of we are looking always on the same things. The landscape is not changing, but in a way we are changing, and our obstacles, our technical enhancement is changing, and it shows especially in 2024 and in the last 30 or even 40 years of development of technological interventions, it's changing as well us as humans. So in terms of that, we are very much interested in different forms of pathways of impact. This is a kind of map where we show what kind of different level you have to address, and it kind of tries to illustrate in a way what are the different elements or forms or levels of open innovation in science. And it's very important that maybe we are also talking open innovation in science and arts. I mean, still, it's not the easiest way to understand. Everybody has somehow an understanding of innovation, or we are heavily using the term. On the other hand, we have an understanding of open innovation, which is more user-centered, involving peer groups, and. If you go into the field of open innovation in science and arts, it would really open up a new door to find out ways to do things differently. And this is what actually I prefer to say here. So, an example how to illustrate and how we work, and I was very happy to get the reference from ITU, project-based work. We don't have students in our institutions, we only have researchers, we have public actors, we have relatives, we have people who are having really heart diseases, so they are seeking for help, they are seeking for solutions. For them it's not so easy to understand how everything could be playful, but as we have seen today in the local newspaper, there was a special page on how creativity can create more well-being. That's the new thing what we are kind of trying to preach, and I'm happy with that. But on the other hand, I mean, it's good to say, but secondly, what can be an answer for that? I brought like this through Impact Labs, what we are kind of trying or established in the last years together with 3 very different universities. One is an art university, the University of Applied Arts in Vienna. The second is the JKU, which is one of the local universities you may know. And the third is GÖK. Gesundheit Österreich GmbH. There is no real suitable translation of that, but it's about healthcare. So the 3 impact labs, we kind of founded together with the institutions, as you can see, have very different angles. The one is more into art and sustainability, so this was more focusing on how art can really create an impact on sustainable development goals, on global challenges. And we work with several projects on that. I think it have been 7 or 8 projects. The second one is the Future We Want Impact Lab. It's more about medical AI. It's about how can we make the world a better place in terms of machines supporting the problems we have in healthcare. And the third one, the Caring Communities for Futures Lab, is more about caretaking. It's about relatives with old people, with ill people. It's about doctors, nurses, all these kind of people. What kind of support they would actually need in terms that this have a real impact in their daily life. So I want to bring one example, because what I also think what is very important, besides it's project driven, it should be mission driven. I mean, we have the European missions. It's the easier way to kind of elaborate here, maybe in the audience. But I mean, you can create your own mission. But to create a mission doesn't mean to say like, yeah, we are fighting for. It's more like really think about deeply what could be the impact of the mission, who do I need within that mission, and what kind of players. And here we are very coming to this term of open education and interdisciplinarity, because we definitely have to get out of our places where we know each other, where we know what we are talking to each other, we have the right terminology and all that kind of things. So the Cancer Mission Lab is under the Cancer Mission, and it actually deals with the fact that we are not dealing with the patients. We are looking on everything else except the patients. And this was a really, as I said before, having new eyes. Taking the patient with cancer out takes a lot of risk, because everybody says first, how can you take the patients out? But looking in everything surrounding the patients makes much more sense in time of how to support them. 12 seconds. I think the last thing I want to tell you, next week, commercial, Forum 2024, OISTOM as we call it, it's in Salzburg. There will be a great community gathering. You're very much invited. Be my guest. Thank you very much.
All right, last up is Laura Veart, and she is the International STEAM International Program Manager, leading a portfolio of both international and interdisciplinary projects at STEAM House, Birmingham City University's award-winning innovation center.
Thank you very much. Hi, so I'm going to give you a whistle-stop tour of STEAM House. This is our building. We're very proud of it. We always say we're not just a building. STEAM House is part of Birmingham City University, the second university in Birmingham. We've got over 33,000 students, and we've always worked with local industry and the creative sector. We have a lot of creative graduates. And it was a former rubber and bicycle factory based right in the centre of the city that's all been redeveloped and regenerated in the last 4 or 5 years, with the large black part at the back, which is now teaching space and collaborative labs. So we opened in October 2022 with the aim of fostering interdisciplinary practice in higher education by integrating the science, technology, engineering, arts and maths together. It's an innovation centre, so we look outwards towards the businesses in the city, but of course our students are impacted by the work that we're doing. So we're a collaborative hub for the region where academics, researchers, industry professionals and students can work together on creative projects. The goal is to drive innovation in the region and enhance student learning experiences by giving them opportunities to address those real-world challenges through these multidisciplinary approaches that we've been talking about today. So, what do we do at STEAM House and what have we got here? I'll try and go through this. I've realised we do a lot and it's hard to get it on a slide. But we have these collaborative spaces that we were just talking about, and I know ITU have talked about developing those. We've not moved? Okay, we have moved. We have these collaborative spaces. We call it the Challenge Lab, right in the heart of the building, which is accessed through different areas where we can hold these challenge events, design sprints, everything's movable, everything's interactive. And that's a different way of learning for businesses that come in, for academics and researchers, and we also have students and teaching space in our facility as well. We also have a production space on the bottom floor, so businesses can come in and prototype. We have woodworking, metalworking, a biomaterials lab there. So, businesses are able to come in and test new ideas as part of our facilities. We also have artist studios and incubator spaces for businesses, so small businesses can come and be incubated in our facility. And we have business support programs, mentors and activities for this ecosystem that we're trying to build between the students, the academics and the businesses in our city. We also have educational opportunities for our students. Of course, we bring them in and they're part of projects that involve our businesses and some of the other work that we're doing within the facility. But we also give them opportunities to take part in sort of business programs, alongside the incubator, we have a hatchery. So this is to hatch small businesses from our graduates and final year students. They get to take part in an 8-week program. And the successful ones then are offered some seed funding and go on to the next stage of their business journey in our incubator. So in terms of our achievements over the last, 10 years we've been running, we started off as a very small enterprise and built that building over the last 4 or 5 years. It's having that reputation in the city and the region now, that we work as an innovation centre, but collaboration and interdisciplinary working is really key. People come to us from lots of different sectors and want to know how we can support and work with them. We've secured a lot of funding, not just for that building, but for business support programs. People know that through the sorts of work that we do, we work with the artists, we work with the creative sector, we work with small businesses, and we can also bring in those corporate businesses to work alongside them. So we're always trying to sort of build those networks and collaboration between different sectors and disciplines as well. We hope we've created a space that's going to enhance learning for students. You know, our students aren't, there are courses within our facility, but it gives them access to different sorts of educational experiences through the business support and the activities with businesses that we put on. And of course, through international projects, we've worked with some of the universities across Europe who are also doing interdisciplinary practice in their universities as alongside ours, Electronica, to look at some of the ways that STEAM is being integrated into the university sector and higher education sector. So there has been some papers published and some research done in this area, which I can refer you to afterwards, but we've been working on that alongside the sort of innovation element. So I suppose the learning, and this has been said already today, is about that, that we know innovation often occurs at that intersection of disciplines, and that's at the forefront of our mind. We're wanting to bring people together, and collaboration is really important to us. But of course, this is challenging. STEAM means different things to different people all the time. People are not always clear what that means to them and how that will work, depending on whether they're coming from a STEM or art sector, or even when they're coming from an academic or business sector. But we work through that and try and support different organisations to collaborate in different ways. At the moment, we've had a lot of support from our leadership, and that's why we've got to the point that we have at the moment, but making sure people do understand what we're trying to do and the benefits of this interdisciplinary working has always been a challenge, but we've succeeded in some ways and have got as far as we have. Our next challenge is, and I can't wait to talk to some people here today and on the floor, is to embed STEAM across the different faculties. We have 4 faculties. At the moment, there are small courses, there are the interactions that I've talked to you about in the sort of business field, but there is a really ambitious program that STEAM will be part of every student's curriculum. So I think this will be project-based. We're developing it at the moment, but watch this space in the next year or 2. And finally, I just wanted to touch on AI, as I know this was a theme today. We are on our STEAM House AI journey, I'd say, at the moment. It's not something that we necessarily teach within the Innovation Centre, but it's very business-led, as you can see from the comments that I've already given. And actually, businesses are asking us for support and are asking for our students and graduates to work with them, because I think, as somebody already said, you know, the new generation and the people that are working on this and learning about AI now are the people that are going to support those businesses of the future. So I think it's quite exciting for STEAM House to have that cohort of graduates and students that we can work with. I'm going to leave you with a website. Everything is there, because I know that was very quick, and I look forward to talking to you all later. Thank you.
All right, that took some effort. That was 7 presentations, 7 minutes each. We made it. So now we're going to enter a 10-minute break. But first, I just want to say that was a lot for us to cover. There were a lot of really big ideas in there. We learned about how we need to be 5 years ahead, how we need to build connections with intention, how we need to think about actuation as moving people to action, not just the devices or the machines taking action, continuous learning and adaptation as a student and an educator. What's the role of sensorial and embodied experience, the power of intentional inclusion and care, and how building an ecosystem of relationships takes time and takes patience. We're going to continue this discussion at 4:15, and we're going to have a panel discussion about how do we educate the transformers of tomorrow. Take a breather. You've got books in the corner in the back of the room that are documenting the journey of IT use. So you might want to browse through that while you're on break, and we'll be back in 10 minutes. Form or take place to ensure the type of collaboration we want in these interdisciplinary groups, or to achieve outputs and outcomes that are both usable and useful and used. So, Joanna, you already picked up that mic pretty fast. You want to get us started?
Okay, so thanks. Yeah, I just have one comment, and I think some of the other people have been doing more with these products. But way back in the 90s, I was in a field called New AI, where we were taking a lot of inspiration from biology, and we invited all these really famous biologists to come to our conferences. We gave them keynotes. And yet they never cited us. We cited them, and they never cited us. And finally, we realized, I don't remember, it was one of my colleagues, but I've been amplifying this ever since. In fact, I remember Brigida Hallam figured this out. It's like diplomacy. If you want to go to a country, you don't expect them to learn your language. You have to learn their language. So if we wanted to be cited, we had to take the time, and it is extreme effort in academia, to get published in their journals. So I think part of interdisciplinarity is showing that respect, and I'll take a tiny bit turn longer. I saw a really interesting meeting at Mannheim between computer scientists and social scientists, and the publication rate is so different that they really had to understand that, and they had to facilitate that within their processes, so that you had the different kinds of outcomes being provided and people contributing to all of them. And supporting all of them and recognizing these differences, and it is a sacrifice, But you get the consequences. You get all this extra input.
Any type of relationship that requires communication requires sacrifice. So yeah, who would like to add into the communication part? Stefanie? Oh.
I think yeah, thank you. I'd say there's always we do a lot of facilitated work at STEAM House, so we have an innovation services team, and they bring people together from lots of different sectors, and they facilitate those conversations, and I think that's really important. How do you talk, an engineer and an artist, how do we explain what's going on and try and get to the next level or to develop a new service or product? So I think a lot of those facilitated conversations support that, but yeah, it's often a challenge, but it's sort of problem solving, and that's quite an exciting and interesting way of doing things as well. So I think we like the challenge, and we like to be in the middle of that, I suppose, at STEAM House.
LaJuné, I want to bring you in because you have a background as a figure skater. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you talk a lot about embodied practice. So I'm curious, how does that work with the communication? How does that build a foundation for communication and further collaboration?
Yeah, so I have a really random sort of weird background, and when I first started going to college, I went to NYU originally for mechanical engineering, but then I was like, no, this is not the vibe, so I'm gonna not do this. So I switched my major to digital media, and I got to learn all of these various different digital technologies. And I was really inspired, and also I just didn't know that you could make art with technology. So just knowing that field even existed was just very mind-blowing to me. I think that a lot of the issues started to come up when I realized that I was just learning tools and technologies, and I was learning how to essentially communicate with them without understanding what that meant, who was in charge of how we were communicating through those tools, who was creating those systems in ways that we could make the art that we were making. And so I think I had this rising intimidation and anxiety that sort of built up in my body over the years. And so, but I decided that I would continue to make no matter what, and I would continue to learn the technologies and the tools regardless. But now as an educator, I realized that I wanted to really focus on really naming why that intimidation and why those anxieties are there, and where they show up in the body. Mainly because in my work, I deal a lot with also with avatars, motion capture, tools that deal with the body, but digitally. So to sort of extract from that process the sort of harmful narratives or harmful systems that we often have to navigate in our day-to-day lives. I guess like that's like the main conversation that I want to hold in my classes, like as we use the tools, what does it mean to build new tools?
Mm-hmm. So communication is a mindset, it's a value set, it's a care set. It requires a sensorial experience. Daniela, I want to bring you into the conversation because you're taking some very maybe sometimes difficult data sets and interpreting them or educating and building together cohorts of interdisciplinary teams. And I'm curious, how do you ensure that those outputs, those outcomes are both useful, usable, and used? How does communication really fit into that?
Yeah, thank you very much, and sorry that I cannot be in person with you, but it's an Ars Electronica, so I mean we should be able to communicate also like this. So the talks I heard were very interesting, and I'm working at the interface of climate science and society, and we are developing tools, products to support society to transform towards a climate resilient lifestyle, or let's say cope with climate change, let's put it this way. And for the communication for us, what helped a lot is to understand which level of interaction you are aiming for. So would you like to inform people? So you, like we had before, you give a talk. So you just want that they hear you. Or would you like that they tell you something? So you're doing a survey. So you would like to ask them in a consultation, tell us, what are your needs? What do you want? Where do you want to get in? And then the next level, intensity of participation, would be a dialogue. So what do we want to achieve jointly? And what kind of knowledge, which expert knowledge and practitioner knowledge we need? And then we come to the partnership, which is the intense level of creating, of co-creation of knowledge, information, products. And I think for us, it helped a lot to be very clear right from the beginning, before picking a format for communication or getting into a dialogue, to understand what you would like to achieve. And I think it's very important also to understand and appreciate the knowledge of the people you talk with, and you would like to communicate with. So the equal footing I think is very important. And I heard the first comment about the papers and the citation index. And we have, for example, climate change and health. And if you look into the health community, in the medical papers, they have 100 authors. They all talk about climate effects on health, but there's not a single climate scientist on the author list. But this is a problem of science, I would say, and competition. It's not really a problem of communication only. Thanks.
Thank you for weighing in there. And Stefanie, Joanna, you want to jump in real quick?
I just want, that was a really interesting point, but I also want to say it isn't always about equality either. So healthcare papers do tend to get higher citations, but it is coming to some kind of negotiation so that all sides are improved. But I think sometimes we can be overambitious about trying to make everything totally equalized, and it tends to fall apart.
I think that's where the power of intention, and clarifying what those intentions are at the very start are so important for these types of endeavors. Stefanie, I want to ask you. I remember last year just like the energy of the students as they were communicating, their projects. But one of the things that they kept coming back to was one of the biggest things that they really loved about the entire experience was they learned how to collaborate with people. And they had a list of things, for better communicating between themselves and all of the different people that make this possible. So for you, what were some of the biggest communication lessons learned that you brought into this last year?
Wow, that's a difficult question. I don't know. I think to realize that there is a symmetry of ignorance between fields. As I think we already have discussed a little bit in this, it's not only respect, of course, to bring in, to understand and to learn to speak the language of the other, but also to really respect what the specific discipline brings in, because we all tend to think our own discipline is more important than the other, and then to say like, well, what this other person saying, it's nice, but I still do my stuff, right? And I think this to really respect the others and to then develop the tools, so the language, or to really to interact with them. I think this is a big thing. And so we've been looking at the students while they're collaborating. We've been talking a lot with them, also afterwards, in between. We've looked at the projects which they are coming out with. And so we're trying to learn from this process and to put it into our curriculum. So right now we're in the process of designing the curriculum for the PhD programs, which we are now putting out, and so and then in the next step, the masters. And we're trying to see how we learned so much from the students. How can we really use it in the curriculum design? And maybe when I'm at the curriculum, I would like to highlight that we have a call for applications out for 5 PhD positions, paid 40 hours, for people who are interested in digital transformation of learning. And so anybody interested, please come to us. This is for all sorts of disciplines. It's not just for computer science. So it's for computer science, sociologists, psychologists, anything, whatever your background is, welcome, and just come to us.
Excellent, thank you. Oh, Laura, wait. Yeah, go ahead.
Just to add to that, I think what you were saying about the respect, and we have a principle that STEM and arts has to be on an equal footing. That's something that we talk about at STEAM House. It's not that the mathematician comes in and, the artist is just, we try and make sure that always that's something at the forefront of our minds. And we have principles that we try and embed as well in the work that we're doing around collaboration, cooperation, communication, radical openness, and newness, which was came from the work that we were doing with the STEAM Inc. project with Ars Electronica and some of the other universities. But those things at the front of our mind help us, cooperation and collaboration and communication are just essential. And, to get the innovation, you need that radical openness and newness, but it really does fundamentally sort of drive what we do. So.
Well, speaking of those principles and practices, we hear a lot about transdisciplinary, interdisciplinary. I'm gonna have to back away. Programs, and usually it's, well, I shouldn't say usually. I'm a researcher. I should never say generally, right? Or usually. But what we often see is that it's very superficial. Those layers or levels of connection are not interwoven. And so I'm curious, Georg, when you were talking about the different practices and being inclusive, are there certain practices that you ground your projects in to ensure that layer or that level of connection is achieved?
Yeah, it's not an easy question to answer because, as we know, and as you said, in terms of inter- and transdisciplinary cooperations, you have several layers to achieve. It's the communication level, it's the common goal, but it's also a matter of fact of design. And I think the design is very often not taken too seriously, especially not only the design of the project itself, it's much more the design of the culture of the project, how is the treatment in the project, and I'm not talking medical. I'm really trying to bring in this kind of mindset that there are so many questions normally. There is a lot of time pressure, there is pressure from deadlines, from external stakeholders. We all know this kind of business, right? But really to step back and sometimes think about what kind of culture and interaction, we heard it as well, interaction quality, in what terms of impact, or at least what do we want to achieve and how we get to that? How do we deal with failure? All these kind of things. We're talking in so many kind of discussion rounds. it's on the table. And when I talk design, it's kind of implementation, so to say, into the project.
Right.
And it's a very needful new definition of what a project is and could be.
Excellent. Thank you. Joanna, I saw you want to jump in there.
I totally want to jump in with a couple old stories. I'd love to hear some new stories. When I was at MIT, so I'm going to show some bad stories as well as some good stories, okay? So I was at MIT. There was people that got these enormous amounts of money to do these big collaborative interdisciplinary projects. And all the professors sat in the students worked with the professors. And then there would be this inspection that would come once a year. And so there'd be like 1 week when the PhD students suddenly had to scramble and glue all the pieces together and put this veneer of, interdisciplinarity on it. Now, in a way, this has to do with the stupidity of the funding model, right? Actually, this was all valid work, but there wasn't really a there. In a way, they talked a little bit. It probably had some benefit, but not that much. The complete opposite story of that, so I got two stories coming from that. The complete opposite story, which also illustrates that equality isn't totally necessary, was I met a guy who was absolute genius of biology, had his entire own building that he'd funded, saving species that were, he was a specialist in trying to understand extinctions and whatever. He was basically an orangutan person. But he said, I always, if I can find any money on a project, I bring in one of those agent-based modelers, not because I care at all about the papers they put out, but because the questions they ask are different than a biologist would ask. So the PhD student is getting the benefit of a PhD sitting in a lab with people who are real domain experts. And the rest of the lab is actually out there saving these animals, right? But they're getting help from each other a little bit anyway, even this very unequal, but still both productive. So then finally, the other thing that came out of watching these projects was at some point the European Commission asked me to review some of these large projects. And I can tell you all the ones, they're like 5-year projects. And if they said, in the last 6 months, we're going to bring all the parts together, threw it in the wastebasket. Okay? So and we were just talking about this during the break. One of the fundamental things to a successful project is that it's iterative, that you are talking to each other, you do keep seeing that the parts are working together, and that you make time and planning for that.
Yeah, you're building a culture, as you said before, and it has to be started at the very beginning and constantly maybe tweaked or adapted as you learn. I noticed you were going to jump in, LaJuné.
I guess I really like what you all are talking about. I think for me, one of the main questions or things that I like to think about when I think about power and how how different technologies hold different power. I've been sort of reworking in my mind what is technology, and so I also do performance art too. And so I'll make the whole thing, I'll make the motion capture, the Unreal, whatever. But then I'll also now perform in it. And one of my takeaways from my last performance was that my voice is also a technology, and that my body is also a technology, and that those two things also need to be equally respected, as well as alongside with these digital tools too. Because I think a lot about power dynamics and what it means to, yes, have respect for the work that's been done, but also to be and feel respected by the work that has been done too. So it's I feel what does it mean to have that relationship or that cycle that is in a way not always necessarily even in power, but at least respectful in what it's trying to do and achieve.
And it's being explicit about how we make space for that and how we recognize where those power dynamics are at play, right? Stefanie, I want to see. Daniela. Oh, Daniela, I'm so sorry. Look at there. There's a little hand on the big screen right there that I totally missed because I'm looking over here at this screen. Daniela, where would you like to jump in?
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in with the design of the project. So I think that's absolutely true, and extending this out of science, so we heard it in science, multidisciplinary or the interdisciplinary science projects, but we work a lot with stakeholder practitioners. And we have developed a co-creation process along cycles and as many others. And I think it's important that the questions at the beginning will be co-designed already. So in this project or whatever it is. But I think that's clear. But what I wanted to highlight here, what has not been said yet, is there must be room and times for parts in the project to step back a little bit. Mm-hmm. And I think that is something which we often do not see. So if there is a part in the work plan which is more dependent on one or the other actor in this, then it is fully okay that the others are not equally involved. And we often mix it up and say we work jointly and we work fully interdisciplinary in co-creation and I don't know what. And that means everyone has to be there all the time. And I don't think that works. But I think there's also the question about who actually is taking over the responsibility to make sure that there is room for stepping back or, let's say, jumping in at certain points or being more creative or less creative. And I think that needs to be clarified at the beginning of the projects much more carefully than we did this in the last years.
Excellent.
And that needs to be in the education, so that's why I say this.
Definitely. Joanna?
I hadn't said anything at the time, but that was an issue I had with the idea of constant tweaking. Sometimes you have to let something go and see how it develops. You know, we all have multiple projects, but also as was just said, that was beautifully said, so I didn't really need to add.
Well, it goes into the design of the program, right? And that you're building in those reflection points, that you're taking time not only at the beginning, but throughout the entire process or the project to be able to say, hey, you know, are we all on the same page? Are we not on the same page? Is there something that we need to be doing different so that we don't at the 11th hour go, oh my gosh, you know, we didn't achieve what we wanted and now we have to like maybe spruce up, you know, what that end deliverable is or what it looks like.
Yeah, no, this is exactly what I said in my talk a little bit about regulation. It is about striking these balances, recognizing the signals that you need to slow down or speed up or whatever. But it isn't that there's some single magic formula, you know. Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, maybe I was hearing a little bit talking about money, and always when it comes to the fact that talking about money, I love it. Because normally the internal vectors is always about interdisciplinarity, but we talked about equality as well. And I mean, in a way, I totally agree. We don't have, in terms of content, we don't have to treat always every project part equally. Mm-hmm. But it's very often the case that systematically it's unequally treated. What is the contribution to the project? I mean, the artists come to the end and then they just beautify it? No, that's not the case. We're sitting here at Ars Electronica. It has a long history of showing it's not just bridging the gap between art and science, it's already becoming a bridge. But I think I want to emphasize this in terms of funding, in terms of design costs. It's costful. It's not cheap. And if it's cheap design. So please really think of it. And it's also not only the design aspect and the aesthetical part, it's also the artistic part. Means becoming very early stage thinking about things in the planning phase of something, holding the artistic momentum in, which is a very tricky and not always easy, most often very critical moment for the project, because it sometimes seems art and science doesn't fit very well together. But I think this is a chance. It's something that we have to keep in mind in terms of project culture, that taking the arts into it makes a lot of noise. But
what I found too, and I'd love for you to react to this, is that when you're right about the bridge, but somebody or somebodies need to come together to be that bridge, to help interpret, to help see the different perspectives. And oftentimes I don't see that role is clearly called out in the project, or it's automatically defaulted to the project manager. Stefanie, you want to jump in there? How do we balance that implicit versus explicit, role and responsibility to be the bridge and to help facilitate the constant communication, or the clearly communicating where people lean in or can lean in or should lean in?
Well, this is why we at ITU want to apply design thinking or art thinking or whatever this is called. So there are different variations of this, but this should be a method for bringing people together. And I think actually the very critical part is right in the beginning of the project, where it's about understanding the problem. And there we really need to have everybody in room, because we need to bring in these different perspectives. Each discipline brings in a piece of know-how or a piece of the problem's possible solution and on how to look at the problem. And this needs to be early on integrated. And I think this is also a place where people can learn to speak, to learn each other's language and learn each other's perspectives, and then really to take some time in the problem understanding or problem framing phase, and not immediately jump to the solution space. Mm-hmm. And so I think this is an important thing, and this is what our coaches, each of our projects will have a coach which has the task of bringing in this design thinking, art thinking methodology into it, and different ways of facilitating this kind of collaboration and communication.
Let's actually, Joanna, LaJuné first.
Just really quick. For me, like, this actually is really an interesting topic, because as someone who like comes in from like a technologist, also as an artist standpoint, I'm often bridging that gap myself, and like I'll bring in performers. I'll bring in someone with deeper technology, with a deeper technology like understanding, and I think that it really comes down to that's where I can say like I'm really grateful for my education, mainly because like learning how to become an artist conceptually. I'm actually would say like I'm still more of like a baby artist rather than like in more like the technologist side. But I love this idea of like having learned how to use technology through a creative lens, and then use my role as like an artist or like an artist leader to sort of bring in people that I know are specialists in different fields. Like I can work with someone who's the greatest choreographer, and then I can also come in and work with someone who's an amazing performer, and then I can bring in someone who's an amazing coder, and then I can bridge that gap by having us also do a lot of process building techniques. Like I don't necessarily like to go into projects just with the product in mind, but really, like, I think what's so important, like I got to do like a 10-day residency with 7 collaborators of mine who were mostly like performers, singers, but then I had like a technologist who was helping me with like the tech stuff. And literally, like, I remember like the people that we were doing the residency with, they were like freaking out because they were like, oh, are you doing anything? Like they were like trying to look to see like what was happening. But then like at the last day we did our presentation, and it was a 45-minute long, gorgeous piece, like where we were all moving, all singing, all dancing, motion capture, animations, like it was all there. But I think that what's really important is just creating that space for a process to be built. And it can be organic, like it doesn't need to be like this, like now we do A, B, and C. Like no, it's just like, oh, now we can just jive together, we can just vibe and just like be with each other. and understand each other, which is really just relationship building. It's just what it means to build relationships. It's not just like trying to get something out of someone all the time. So yeah, I mean, like, I think like for me, I really just like to just vibe with my collaborators, and we just find space for us to be ourselves and give of ourselves in a way that we best know how. But that's through focusing on the process rather than just the product.
Excellent, thank you. Joanna?
Well, you just said the same thing I was going to say in a little different way, only better. So when we talk about art and interdisciplinary projects, I don't like to talk about it as like a means of communication or a means of thinking or increasing our creativity before we do the real work. I think it's really important to recognize that the artwork itself, that moment of community building, that even if it's a transient piece, that can be seen as the goal, right? That human sociality is the goal, and that everything else, all the sustainability, all the technology, everything else is about the facilitating our capacity, because socializing is our survival strategy, right? It is what we're about. So I just think that's really important that you just took that for granted and did that, ran with it. So
Laura, please jump in.
Is it working? Yeah, it is working. Just going back to the design thinking, because actually that's very fundamental to the work that we do. All our challenges, all our challenge labs, we bring in people from all sorts of places who've never done design thinking before, which really does, break things down and start from the beginning with those challenges, and people are having to communicate and design sprints as well is a method. And actually on the Steamhouse website, they're all free to download. We've got lots of different methods and techniques that are on there that my colleagues have been developing over the years, and they're sort of templates, and it's all very interactive. So this is the way to get people communicating at the beginning and all on the same page. And then because of that iterative process that we've just been talking about, you keep going back and looking at it and deciding whether or not you're along the right lines as a designer or as design thinking process, and that's the way we like to work. And I think that helps us to get to some of these bigger projects with different organizations and stakeholders in the city.
Excellent, thank you. Daniela. Oh, maybe. Daniela, I want to bring you in because when I said the word communication, sometimes that can be, as I think it was understood amongst this group as something that is interactive. It's not passive, but more of an interaction. And you said the word dialogue, and I'm wondering, are there some formal or informal practices that you have found that really start to help create the space for dialogue, for that type of bridge, for that type of practice, bringing all of those people together for those useful, usable, and used outputs and outcomes?
Yeah, I mean, there are, of course, many formats which I would say you can label for dialogue and communication. But for me, these are two different things. Communication is, of course, broad, but could also be one way. It's not necessarily a dialogue, and it's not a discourse, which I think we also have to discuss. And they all need different ways of sharing knowledge, expertise, and of getting engaged with each other. And when I talk about dialogue, for us, it's very important that there are ways and formats where informal discussions are possible. So that often helped a lot. So that to get into a dialogue, it's not like I ask you something and then hopefully you answer, but it is creating an intrinsic interest in getting into exchange. And this often for our work between, let's say, climate scientists and practitioners, and that's where I take the expertise. I'm not talking about scientists among scientists at the moment. That's a completely different story. But when we talk about practitioners and scientists, then, and let's say science and policy, for example, The informal setting is important, where there is no tweet and no minutes and nothing which is leaving the room, so that you first have a trust-building process and to get into this regular dialogue, where people can also come in with some feelings. And I think that's where also we come closer to the art role in the way when I work or we work along our climate services products. I think it's the emotional engagement which I think is more clear in a dialogue than if we use the word communication. That's why I'm trying to be very precise in wording, depending on the message I would like to give. And I think that is because of the many different disciplines and characters I worked with. I think that's a lesson which we have really learned, and I think that would be nice to be highlighted. And I think it got lost a little bit in the last 10, 15 years about interdisciplinary master, I don't know what, we work all together jointly and we reach a better communication and things are getting easier. So I think that is important that we learn from the last years and decades, and I think the role of the disciplines is important, and this comes in dialogue. So we had the respect before, and I think that goes along the same lines. And yeah, so maybe that's all I can say. Thanks.
Thank you. That precision is needed, especially when we talk about emotional engagement and that respect that we talked about, how we have to understand each other. So I'm curious, with our last couple of minutes that we have left, I did promise in the pre-meeting, if you had any questions that you wanted to ask of each other while you're all gathered here. Does anybody want to ask a question of the group, of anybody in particular? Oh, Stefanie, you want to do so?
Joanna, could you envision, how could we bring this top-down world perspective of an economist into our project, basically? Because I find it very more and more interesting to, on the one hand, say, okay, we build solutions, but on the other hand, we have to understand the bigger picture in which we're doing this. And I, at least as a computer scientist, I never learned about it, let's say it this way. And so I'm wondering, do you have any ideas how we could include that?
Thank you. So many microphones. Thank you. First of all, I think a lot of people will chafe about, because the economists think they're on the top right now, and a lot of governments unfortunately have put them on the top. So it's not that economists run the world. But I understand your question was really about, how are we looking at these overall dynamics? So how are you getting this feeling about what is this perpetuation? Which I would say, you're right that good economists see that. I don't mean that micro is not good, but I'm just saying that it's good macroeconomists have to see that. Ecologists have to see that. And honestly, as a computer scientist, one of the things that really helped me is agent-based modeling. So really having empirical experience, building a scene and seeing how the little pieces, what kinds of dynamics come out and what can you do to shape those. So that's one of the pieces that's helped. But of course it is also interdisciplinarity. And trust me, with economists, that's like almost impossible. So it's like you need to get a bunch of people that kind of know about economics that are not economists to help you. And then you have to publish in these interdisciplinary journals. Like I have one in with actually a famous microeconomist in a journal that's like neuroscience, psychology, and economics, right? But seriously, I just think some of these big problems, these big questions, and I think you were referring to some of the stuff about like how inequality is. Well, I mean, this is an open question, right? A lot of people think social media is driving polarization, but the data, 1 million people have looked for that, and the papers keep showing it's not true. And on the other hand, certain kinds of economic precarity are very correlated with it. And I just today found out it's not even a paper out, it's a talk that I'm missing tomorrow at Heritage School, but it's a guy from Harvard talking about, they've shown that the other way works too. So France went out of its way to use money, to distribute money into regions that would be impacted by economic transitions, and it did reduce right-wing voting in those regions. So we see both positive and negative evidence that these, but how can you say where you get these intuitions from? All I can say is, for me, a lot of it was like, I started looking at like something weird is happening with Google. I think it has more power that doesn't fit into my understanding of how civics works. And then as you went up, you kept seeing, well, to what extent is this Google? To what extent is it Twitter? To what extent is this happening with the financial industry and the pharmaceutical industry and the petrochemical industry? And it isn't just this one thing. So I don't know. I just throw myself into a lot of conferences and just, I don't know. It took me forever to finish my PhD, I can tell you. It was like 10 years. But, and we can't all do that, and I get that. And a lot of people are better at doing any one thing than I am. But I add some value by being a bridge, like we were talking about before.
We only have a couple minutes left, but if I were reading the room, Daniela, your body language on the screen, if you were here in the room, I could tell you would want to be picking up that mic. Do you want to add something to that conversation there?
Yeah, I think it's increasing system thinking, and I would add to the agent-based modeling the system dynamics modeling as a tool to integrate economics, but also social science with natural science and with practice knowledge. So that was my comment here. Thanks a lot for your attention.
Excellent. So we are in the last minute. I want to thank everybody for their time, their attention, their energy, for being here in the heat under the lights. You've done wonderful. We can continue this conversation right over here when we have some drinks, some conversation, and we can continue that dialogue. And so I really appreciate your time, your energy, and all of you as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you, Daniela.